My favorite question, rude ass question that people love to ask is, ¿Estás muda? Or like, ¿Nunca hablas? ¿Estás muda? ¿Por qué no hablas? And, I'm just sitting there trying to eat my food. Everyone, welcome back to Tell Me Más with me, your host, Dina, or how you may know me as Dinapreneur on TikTok and on Instagram. This is the place where we are always chismeando, but always creciendo. And we are going to talk all about wellness, mental health, and all the good stuff and hard stuff that comes with being a chingona and badass Latina. So let's get into today's episode. Anyways, I hope y'all are doing well so far this week. It has been a long last 2 weeks for me. It's getting super hot here in Minnesota, and it's crazy because either we have really cold winter storms, or on the opposite end, our summers are super humid and sticky, and I've been breaking out in heat rashes, which hasn't happened to me since I was like in middle school. So it's been it's been a struggle over here with the weather, but everything's good so far. And I do apologize that these episodes have only been coming out every other week. I'm working on consistency here still. Ideally, I do want to get episodes out every Friday, but right now it's been every other Friday, so do bear with me. And como siempre, you can listen to the podcast on Spotify or Apple Music, and you can watch the video version on YouTube. So please follow on Spotify and subscribe on YouTube. I so would really appreciate it. And like and comment with your thoughts on each and every episode. Share with all your amigas. Let's start to build this community. I am so excited to finally start building the self-development podcast that I was always looking for. I felt like all the other self-development podcasts were run by white women, which isn't bad, but I wanted more of that Latina perspective, and I couldn't find many, so I decided to start my own. And I don't want it to be too serious, although we do talk about serious things. I do want to have some laughter. I do want to hear from you all, and eventually, once we start to get more listeners, I want to ask your experiences, and I want to get to know you all and have you featured and have guests. So I'm so excited to see what kind of direction we're going towards, because I have so many dreams, so many ideas for the podcast. And yeah, gracias por escuchar, and thanks for being here. If you're watching the YouTube version, I so really appreciate it. Alrighty, but let's get into today's episode. We're going to be talking about being an introverted Latina. And it's funny because you wouldn't think that an introverted Latina would have her own podcast and be on social media, but I do talk to myself all the time, so might as well record it, right? So it's not that strange if you think about it, but yeah, I posted a video about being an introverted Latina on TikTok probably a year ago now, and it went viral in my standards of going viral, because there are so many of you that resonated with all the problems that I talked about being an introverted Latina and how hard it can be sometimes, just because in our culture, extroversion is a much more preferred than introversion, and we'll get into all of that. But I just wanted to create the space to talk about this because I've never heard a conversation on this. I want to hold a space for you to feel heard and to feel seen as an introverted Latina, or even being on the quieter side of being a Latina. And it's just so annoying because either we're too loud or we're too quiet, and on top of just being a woman in American society, or a woman in general in this world, being a Latina woman has all these other things attached to it. So we're going to go into that and really own into this power of being an introverted Latina, and that we are here and we want to be seen, and that we are awesome. And I want you to own your introversion, because it is what makes you unique, and it's not something you should be ashamed of. But yeah, we are going to touch on all of that y más. So Stay tuned. Okay, but let me share this tea with y'all that I found when I was researching for this episode, because I wanted to see what kind of definitions there were out there for what an introvert means, because I think a lot of people think that being an introvert means that you're inherently big word there, that you're inherently shy or have social anxiety, when that's not always the case. So let me just share with y'all what I found. Okay, so on Google, let me pull up the definition here. So when you type in onto Google, define introversion, and you can hear me typing. It literally says, like, the first thing that pops up is a shy, reticent person. I don't even know what reticent means. Not revealing one's thoughts or feelings readily, which, okay. And then there's another one. Okay, the rest of the definitions are all right. But yeah, the first one that you see is shy. And I think that's what kind of makes people think that being an introvert inherently means that you're shy, when again, that's not always the case. I used to be a lot shyer when I was growing up. I'm not as shy as I used to be. A lot of that has to do with social anxiety. We've grown, and we've grown to love our introversion here in esta casa. So, but anyways, I just thought it was so crazy that that was the first definition Google pulls up, that introversion equals shyness. Like, why is that even the first definition? Because they need to update that. What I think an introvert is someone that prefers less stimulating environments, whether it be with a few people or just by themselves, someone that prefers quiet environments and usually kind of gets their energy from being alone. And then let's look at some other definitions here. It says typically reserved or quiet person, tend to be introspective, quiet. Someone who tends to turn inward, meaning that they focus more on internal thoughts, feelings, and moods, which, fair. But yeah, I don't really want people to think that introversion is someone who is shy. Not that there's anything wrong with being shy. I also want to say that. But I just think that, like I've been saying 20 times already, being an introvert does not always mean that you're shy. Most shy people are introverts. Not all introverts are shy people. You get what I'm saying? I just wanted to kind of set that definition out there just in case you felt that you never really understood what being an introvert is, or you don't really quite get it. And yeah, there's a lot of definitions on there, but to me, it's definitely someone who's prefers less stimulating environments, prefers kind of their alone time, gets energy or feels kind of revitalized from being alone, stuff like that. And I also think it's interesting. I have a friend who seems like she's an extrovert, right? She loves to talk, loves, interacting with people. But at the end of the day, she kind of needs to go home and be by herself. And that's kind of more of an introvert tendency. She never really liked going to really loud parties and stuff like that. Because, at heart, she's an introvert, but she wasn't someone who was inherently quiet or shy. And that's what I'm saying. I feel like there's such a spectrum of whether or not you're an introvert, whether or not you're an extrovert, whether or not you're an ambivert. I think that's the one where you're kind of a little bit of both. Just because some people see you as an introvert, maybe some of your friends see you more as an extrovert. So I think it really does have to do with your environments too, and how you're feeling and stuff like that. It just really varies from person to person. So just because you're an extrovert doesn't mean you don't have your introvert days, or just because you're an introvert doesn't mean you aren't an extrovert in different scenarios. So I just find this fascinating, and maybe it's because the psychology nerd in me really likes learning about these things and how personalities and minds kind of work, but I just find it fascinating. But I just wanted to clear up that misconception that introverts are inherently shy, because all of us are not shy. And people always get surprised. People are always surprised when I tell them that I am an introvert, because I guess I don't come off as shy anymore. Or people are surprised that I tell them I'm an introvert and I do all these things on social media and kind of put myself out there. And again, I'm talking to a camera. I am talking to no one right now. The only people in my apartment right now are my dogs, my cat, and me. So maybe they're listening to me talk. Maybe my neighbors. But, I'm not talking to a group of 50,000 people in real time. That would kind of freak me out. But so People are also surprised when I tell them that I like to go to parties and I love throwing parties. I love going to EDM concerts. I love dancing. I've always loved performing. Again, not really something that has to do with introversion. After that, I really do need like 2 days to myself because it's so much stimulation and being around people that I'm just like, okay, I just want to be by myself now. And I feel pretty comfortable being by myself. I don't think it's scary to me. It's never been scary to me. What are other things that I do as an introvert? Talk to myself. I am very observant. I think it's really easy for me to just kind of do more of the listening versus the talking. But we can run into a lot of problems in Latino culture being an introvert. So let's kind of talk about that because I know y'all will relate to all the stories that I have for y'all being an introverted Latina. So, there's this stereotype that Latinas are loud, they're feisty, they're fiery, whatever you want to call it, that we talk a lot, we're boisterous, and we kind of bring an energy to a room that we all like to dance and kind of be social. And I don't always fit into that box. I butt heads with my mom a lot just because she's way more of an extrovert than I am. And same with my boyfriend's mom. She's definitely more of an extroverted, loves to talk, and stuff like that. And again, we've butt heads in the past before, nothing major, but there's just been some misunderstandings. And I think that's really the summary of it, is that there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to being an introvert in the Latino community. A lot of us are expected, to greet all of our family members when we get home, or to greet people that we don't even know. And that can be kind of intimidating, or we're kind of expected to sit in the living room when we have company over, even though, again, we don't really know them. And then we're kind of expected to have a conversation. And if we are too quiet, we're seen as rude. So it's like, well, what do you want me to do? I'm already in this room where I don't really feel comfortable being in. I much rather be, say my hello, say my goodbye, and go and do my own thing. But we're kind of expected to say something and to be a part of the conversation. And if we don't put anything into the conversation, we're kind of seen as like creídos, or we're seen as like judgy, and it can get frustrating because we're just quiet, we're just listening, we don't really have anything to contribute unless we think it's valuable in contributing. At least that's how I feel. So it can get extremely frustrating. Especially as Latinas, we have to kind of sometimes be the face of the family. We're expected to be put together, be well presentable, and feel comfortable to introduce ourselves to everyone and everything. We're expected to help out in the house or with parties. So if we have a family gathering, we're the ones in charge of, feeding everyone and asking if everyone's doing okay, if everyone has something to eat. And that's a lot of people interaction, and that really was super tiring to me, and I think it's what has made me be not so shy, because it forces me to talk to family members that I don't really even know, and to make sure that they're being well fed or whatever. But again, a lot of those duties fall on the women of the family, and so like while the men just sit there and we're gonna talk about gender roles in the Latino society another podcast episode, but just to show that how difficult it could be for an introverted Latina to go around and ask people all these questions like, oh, you good? Are you good? And be nice and show face, and it can get extremely tiring. And so at the end of the day, when everyone leaves, you're just exhausted, and your family's like, oh, why are you mad? I'm not mad. I'm just tired. I've been talking to all these people that I don't even know for such a long time. So there's that misunderstanding that just because we're quiet and more reserved, that doesn't mean that we're angry, that we're upset. And it can get really hard and annoying to keep repeating that every time we're with our families. My favorite question, rude ass question that people love to ask is, ¿Estás muda? Or like, ¿Nunca hablas? ¿Estás muda? ¿Por qué no hablas? And, I'm just sitting there trying to eat my food. Latino people have a really hard time understanding that no, we're not We're not mad. We're not, upset. We're just existing, and it's really hard for me to explain. I'm just so busy observing everyone and kind of taking in all the conversations around me. Sometimes I just feel like I'm overstimulated, so I much more prefer to kind of observe things. And that doesn't mean if you ask me a question I'm not going to answer or anything like that. Being in a loud environment sometimes overstimulates me, and I just don't even have anything to say unless you ask me. So if you resonate with this, just know you're seen. I feel you. And we'll get through this. I think slowly my mom has started to understand that I'm just a quiet person. I've always been quiet since I was little, been very introverted. I've always would be drawing in the living room while they were watching TV or talking. I would be kind of in my own corner just drawing. I'm still there. I'm still spending time with you. I'm just kind of doing my own thing. And, it doesn't mean that I don't want to be there. I just prefer to be in a more quiet environment. And it's hard when a lot of Latino environments are very loud and there's a lot going on, and it can be very overstimulating. And I grew up having to share a room half the time with my brother, my younger brother, and growing up I had to share a room with my cousin. So it was really hard to find times to be truly just alone. So I really had to kind of mold myself to the environment. Like, I'm just gonna block everyone out and focus on doing what I like to do. And maybe someone relates to me out there. You just kind of got used to being in a loud space and having to take up that space as an introvert. And yeah, I got used to it. And that's why I think I'm so comfortable being in like coffee shops or going to Target by myself. It's just another day for me. Like, I love doing things by myself, and I think that's probably why. And yeah, there could be a downside to it when I tend to kind of need more social interaction just because I get so into just doing my own thing that I forget, I should probably talk to people. So I think that's definitely a downside, but we'll get into that. I went kind of on a tangent here. But yeah, there's a lot of difficulty being an introvert as a Latina. I remember one time, I think there was a miscommunication with my boyfriend's mom. So again, like I mentioned earlier, she's very talkative. My boyfriend and I are very reserved. We're both introverts. So this was maybe like 2 years in, when we've been together almost 6 years, 2 or 3 years in. And she calls us to the side and I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was essentially along the lines of, oh, your brother's girlfriend is much more Latina than Dina because, she goes around and she talks to everyone and is very talkative, and something along the lines of that. And I just felt so disrespected because to me, I love being Latina, and for someone so important in my life to say to me that I'm not being Latina just because of my personality, it hurt my feelings. I didn't say much in the moment. Again, we were kind of still in the beginning stages of our relationship, but I talked to my boyfriend after that. I was like, what your mom said kind of hurt my feelings. And so he talked to her and she kind of understood that what she said was kind of wrong. And yeah, and that just goes to show that there's so much of an expectation put on Latinas to be that voice, talk to everyone. And again, I just want to iterate that I was not being rude. Every time I show up to his family gatherings, I go around, I say hi to everyone, kiss on the cheek, stuff like that. Introduce myself to people that haven't met me yet. And she was essentially worried about me not starting a lot of conversations, and that's just I can work on that. I do acknowledge that, but I think she was just kind of offended or thought that, I didn't like being there. I don't know. I honestly don't know, but I just felt like she could have phrased it in a better way than kind of equating it to how Latina I am or not, and comparing me to his brother's girlfriend, that because she's more talkative and more this or more that, and because I'm an introverted Latina, that she's inherently more Latina than I am. And I was so upset because being Latina is super important to me. But at the end of the day, she apologized and said she didn't mean to offend me. So I think she never really brought that up again. So I do hope that, it's nothing against anyone ever. I tend to be more quiet. It takes a little bit for me to get out of my shell and be that loud person. Even around my own family, I'm not loud. So it's just how I am. And so I never want anyone to be offended about how I am, and I shouldn't feel guilty for being who I am. But it's just so hard. There's just so much miscommunication in the Latino community about being an introvert, and it can get really, really frustrating and lead to situations like this. But yeah, I am thankful it led to, me being seen for who I am. This is all to say that hopefully if you're kind of in the same boat as I am, kind of having that conversation like, no, that's just how I am. I'm quiet. My friends can vouch for me. Not that they need to, but I am just quiet. And sometimes it just takes you a little bit longer for you to feel comfortable around people to really, truly be yourself authentically. As tough of a conversation that can be, I think it's important to have with people that you value in your life, whether it be your partner's parents, your own family members, friend groups, stuff like that. Sometimes I think it's even important for you to acknowledge that with your colleagues or people you work with. Usually people are pretty, accepting of it. You're like, oh, okay, you're an introvert, I get it. Not that they get it, but they'll be kind of more understanding to your boundaries. And I've also gotten what's it called? People often assume that I don't speak English because I'm so quiet. So they're like, oh, you speak English very, very well. I thought you wouldn't speak English very well. I'm like, okay. It's like a backhanded compliment. Like, well, okay. You could have just kept that to yourself. But I've gotten that like twice from some guy that comes in at the gym I work at, and it's like, okay. I used to play volleyball throughout middle school and high school, and my high school volleyball coach, he was so weird, but he was like, oh, you're not being loud enough, like be louder. And I know that I'm a quiet person, and in volleyball you do have to essentially call the ball if you want to grab it, or else you'll run into each other. So I wasn't being loud enough, and he's like, oh, you need to be louder. But he kind of made this remark that like, oh, I know that in a lot of Latino cultures it's not in your best interest to be loud, or a lot of women or Latina women are taught to be quiet and mousy. And it's like, the fuck are you talking about, bro? So it's just like all these backhanded remarks, and it's like I essentially needed to be louder despite it being against my cultural nature, so aka English not being my first language, ? And yeah, that was one of the weird interactions of many that I've had that for some reason just stuck with me, because at that time I didn't really think much about it. But now that I look back at it, I feel like he could have just said, can you speak up, be louder, it's important in volleyball to be really loud and, be assertive. But no, he had to throw in me being Latina into it. So, and yes, this was a white man. And it's like the worst when other family members talk to you about other family members, if you catch my drift. So I have a cousin who's also very introverted, very quiet, and my family are always like, oh, why is she so quiet? Is there something wrong with her? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you've known her all your life. Why are you complaining to me, a fellow introvert, about another introvert? And she's fine. So it kind of makes you think like, oh, I can't imagine what they say about me then to other people. And I also have an uncle, well, a tío. He's not really my tío. He's my grandma's brother. I don't know what that would make him, but we just call him tío. And he's also very reserved, very quiet. And my grandma was telling me that one of my aunts didn't want him to come over to her house anymore, because he's very quiet, very reserved. And so she thought that he was being judgy just because he was being more inherently quiet. And I'm like, yo, just let my uncle exist. Even I know, like, I don't speak to him very much, but even I know that he's always been very reserved. And maybe it's because I've felt seen. Seeing another introvert, an older introvert just existing, I'm like, he gets it. But, to right off the bat be like, he's being judgy? No, he's not being judgy. And so, my grandma talked to her and was like, no, that's just how he is. You should know that. And so the next time he came over, he was a lot more talkative, which was probably like a coincidence. And she's like, well, did you say something to him? He's being a lot more talkative now. And that's what I'm saying. Introversion is a spectrum. You can't expect an introvert to be quiet 100% of the time just because they're quiet most of the time. So if they feel more talkative one day, that just means they're more comfortable being around you, and you should take it as a compliment. That's just my rant and some stories that I have about being an introvert as a Latina, and I probably have so many more that I can't think of right now. But if you have any stories about being an introverted Latina, comment them in the YouTube video, because I would love to hear your experiences and just to kind of build this community that, we're not alone. So if you're listening to this, I hope it kind of brings some reassurance that there are other introverted Latinas out here. It's not unheard of. Dang, I did not realize I would have so much to say about being an introverted Latina. Maybe it's because it's been something I've been dealing with my whole life. So I have a lot to say about it. I wanted to kind of move towards seeing your introversion as something sort of a superpower, because this society doesn't prefer introverts. It kind of thrives on extroverts. And yeah, we need to celebrate that we're introverts. I think for a long time, I really tried to be something that I'm not. I'm like, oh, how can I be more boisterous? How can I be louder all the time? How can I be more talkative all the time? When it's something that didn't come natural to me, while there's a difference to working on social anxiety and coming out of your shell a little bit more, that doesn't mean that you have to leave this whole other side of you behind. I am an introvert through and through, and I'm proud of it. And there's so much power to be had as an introvert. So, honestly, we're probably the calmness that is needed in our families. Latino families can be loud, and yeah, we bring that calmness, that kind of reminder that, okay, it's time to calm down, let's get quiet. But on the downside, we have to be really careful, because our incredible active listening skills can easily be taken advantage of, and quickly you can turn into the family's therapist or your friend's therapist because you're such a great listener. So you have to be really, really careful with that and really establish those boundaries, especially if you're not feeling like, hey, I really don't have the capacity to be listening to this right now. Can we talk about it another day? And it might catch them off guard, because especially if you're always listening to them and you're always there, they're kind of going to feel like, well, what the fuck, are you mad? And it's like, no, you really have to explain, like, no, this is a lot for me right now. I do a lot of listening, not just here, but with friends. I want to acknowledge that it's important for me to listen to you and to hear you out and maybe give you advice, but right now I don't have the capacity for it. I'm feeling tired or overwhelmed, but can we talk about this tomorrow? I think it's really important to establish that boundary, because it can get really easy to be taken as the therapist of the family, especially if you're the firstborn Latina daughter. I think another strength we have too is we really are deep thinkers. A lot of people do come to us for advice. We're very observant, we can be very detail oriented. We thrive in solitude, so we can be very independent and do things on our own. We can also be very creative because we spend all of our time alone. Usually a lot of us like to partake in creative things. Yeah, and I think just we really value those deep connections, because a lot of introverts do tend to be on the quieter side. I think it says a lot when you do open up to someone. Don't let people think that your introversion is not a superpower, because it definitely is, and we need more of it, to be honest. And because we do live in such an extroverted society, let's talk about some ways to really kind of manage that and make sure that we're also taking care of ourselves too, while managing all these societal and family expectations. Like I mentioned previously, super important to set up those boundaries. Gosh, can you tell I'm from Minnesota? But yeah, set up those boundaries, make them clear. If you're not sure what those boundaries are, make time to really reflect on them and what you want them to look like, whether it's writing them down or just kind of spending some time thinking about it, especially if you're having a hard time with a certain family member that loves to, talk your ear off. Let them know, or think of a way to establish a boundary. And it could be what we just talked about previously, pretty much saying, I don't have the capacity for this today. I do care what you're saying or what you want to tell me, but can we please talk about this tomorrow? And that's my summarized version. And also, do you, amiga. If it is in your nature to be more quiet, it's okay. Be more comfortable doing it. It's okay to take up quiet space. It's okay to live with others in silence. Don't feel shame or guilt about it. If anything, it's probably just because it's uncomfortable for the other person. But it's okay to live in quietness and stillness and calmness. It's okay to say no to things that you don't want to go to because you're feeling drained from a long day at work. It's okay to not want to spend time with your friends because your social battery is exhausted. And if you feel like you haven't seen your friends in a long time, how can you meet them in the middle? Whether it's, spending some time with them at their house or your house and doing some quiet activities, whether it's watching TV, watching a movie, doing some art together. It's just some examples. Like, you don't have to go to a loud bar or restaurant every time. Meet them halfway if they're willing to. And the next time you're at a family party and people are being rude to you for being an introvert and they keep asking you like, oh, ¿estás enojada? Or if you hear someone mutter something about you being too creída, you can walk away. It's not worth the effort that you need to put in to shut them down. Just walk away. You can always walk away. And if you are at a party, you can always, excuse yourself, go to the bathroom, take a walk outside, find a more quiet space, take a couple minutes and then come back. Especially overstimulating environments like that, I always like to take a lot of bathroom breaks. Just kind of sit there in the toilet if it's quiet in there and just quiet. Because, I don't know, those environments could be very overstimulating for me. Or just finding like a corner or an empty table, just vibe for a second, whether it's being on my phone or just drinking some water. Because I know it's easier said than done to just not go to family events. But this is kind of a way I like to take care of myself while I'm at one. I know how it is. You're expected to go and to show up and to talk to people and to be a part of the whole thing. So it's okay to just take a couple of moments throughout the day and find a space for yourself and keep going back to your space as often as you need to. Avoid the tías chismosas. You aren't creída. F the haters. Period. And this is just a silly ha 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 moment, but if you're an introvert, let me know if you've ever had these kind of situations. So there's like people that don't really know how to act around an introvert, and I don't really know how to quite explain it. They just act really weird, or they act really uncomfortable when it's just a lot more quiet space than they thought there was going to be. And it used to really bother me because it almost felt like now I had to take charge of the conversation, or they just felt really weird. And like there was just something in the air and it was really, really awkward. And it's so funny because if they go and talk to someone else who's more extroverted, it'll just be like nothing happened. But with you, they don't really get you because they talk a lot, and then you either like don't really pay attention to what they're saying because they're just babbling. And I'm not trying to be rude, but I mean someone who talks a lot and they're just saying things to say things because they're uncomfortable with silence. That can be hard to deal with. So just let me know if you've kind of had any similar moments like that. And then on the other side, I feel like a lot of us get adopted by extroverts and get taken along on their own adventures. And I appreciate people that know how to interact with an introvert because they're not uncomfortable with silence. We could be just eating together for an hour and they wouldn't feel uncomfortable with either of us saying nothing. That's a good friend right there. Get you a friend that understands what it means to be an introvert and that understands your boundaries. And I also want to empower you to find your voice. Just because you are more introverted and more quiet, it does not mean that you don't have a voice. Find power in being quiet. It's honestly such a great superpower to have. I think sometimes there's like these challenges to see how long you can go being in silence with someone. People always feel the need to be like, oh, how's the weather? Or say something weird like that. But honestly, I'm vibing. Don't feel like you can't be vibing when everyone's kind of uncomfortable with the silence. It's okay. That's what makes us such good interviewers or listeners, because if someone needs to take some space to think about something, that's fine. Like, I'm not uncomfortable. Like, take your time to respond to my question. And I think that's something a lot of people can work on. Can I tell y'all how many job interviews I've been in, or any sort of like conversation where I have to answer a question and they just don't give me the space to think about it? Calm your tits. I am thinking, and it shouldn't feel uncomfortable for you to sit in silence as I think. That doesn't mean I don't care about the conversation. I'm just honestly thinking. That's just to say that we make awesome conversators in that way, because we give people the space to think and the space to hold silence without pressuring anyone to talk right away. And I think that's such an undervalued skill. Don't be afraid to go against the grain, because Latino and American cultures are they both prefer extroversion. We live in two communities that thrive on extroversion, so don't be afraid to go against the grain. Hold your own. It's okay to be quiet in a room full of talkative people, and if they have beef with it or problem with it, that's on them. If they feel insecure about themselves when they are in the presence of an introverted goddess, that's their problem, and they should look inward and see how they feel about being in silence. Like, why can't they be in silence that long? That's their own problem. Just hold your own. Don't let others make you feel uncomfortable for being who you are. It's none of their business. Y'all know I love my affirmations, so let's do some affirmations for all my introverted Latina girlies out there. You are not alone. I am here. I'm also an introverted Latina, and we've been talking about all the challenges that it comes with being an introverted Latina, and I just want to tell you that I am proud of you for sticking true to who you are, because it's not easy, especially growing up with what may be a loud ass family and growing up in an environment that prefers extroversion. I see you, and I hope that you continue to feel comfortable in your own skin. But okay, let's get into these affirmations. I'm going to say them twice, and then you can feel free to repeat them in your head or out loud. I am an introverted chingona. I am an introverted chingona. My introversion does not define me. My introversion does not define me. I cherish moments of solitude and use it to reflect and grow. I cherish moments of solitude and use it to reflect and grow. Mi voz es valiosa. Mi voz es valiosa. Me permito ser auténtica y fiel a mí misma. Me permito ser auténtica y fiel a mí misma. And let's take a deep breath. Just know that you are valuable just the way you are, and your voice and your presence is important in this world, amigas. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, despite how introverted or not you are, how quiet, how shy, how loud you may be or may not be. Your presence and your voice matters. And your introversion or extroversion does not define you as a Latina. You are Latina regardless of how loud or how quiet you may be. It does not matter. And I just want you to know that. And I just want you to hear that. And I just want you to believe that. But okay, I think that is the end of this episode of Tell Me Más about being an introverted Latina. I hope that you found that helpful. We really just define what being an introverted Latina is and what it looks like to be an introverted Latina in your family and how to navigate these boundaries and build said boundaries. And then we talked through some stories about being an introverted Latina and all the challenges and also all the strengths that comes with being an introvert. Yeah, eso es todo por hoy. I really do hope that you found that helpful. Please remember to like and follow on Spotify. Share this episode with all your other introverted friends. Even if they aren't Latina, I think we all just want to be heard. We just all want to know that it's okay to be an introvert and it's not a hindrance whatsoever. So send this to all your introverted amigas or amigos. I'm sure they'll appreciate listening to it. If you've watched on YouTube, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It really does mean the world to me. I want to make this podcast in this space as big and as amazing as possible so we can really continue sharing all these positive and amazing conversations and make more Latinas and Latinos be heard because we deserve it. You can also find me on TikTok and Instagram as Dinapreneur, and that's just another space where I talk about wellness, mental health, and being an entrepreneur as a first-gen Latina. And if you have any ideas or have any conversations that you want to hear me talk about, please share them by commenting on any of my videos, sending me a DM on Instagram or TikTok. I am always open to suggestions because, again, this is not about me. This is about building this comunidad where I want us to all feel seen and to feel heard, where we can continue chismeando, but always creciendo. Hasta la próxima. Nos vemos. Bye.